So let's just turn. We're starting a new chapter today, Luke 23. And we'll just start there. And the whole multitude, Luke 23, verse 1, and the whole multitude of them arose and led him, this is Yeshua, unto Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, Thou sayest it. And then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. And when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was also at Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, Yeshua, he was exceeding glad, and he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. And then he questioned him in many words, and he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And when Herod with his men of war set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. So, why was Yeshua taken to Pilate? He was just at Caiaphas. Remember, he went to Annas' house, and then he went to Caiaphas' house, and then they had that second trial again in the morning because they couldn't try him at night. We talked about that last night, so they had like the kangaroo court again in the morning, and now they're bringing him to Pilate. All right, well, they just had a court. Remember, the high priest ripped his robes and said, oh, what more do we need? He's worthy of the death, right? And so why are they then bringing him to Pilate? So the answer, keep a finger here, we're coming back to Luke. Go to John chapter 18. And we'll pick up in verse 28 for the answer to why did they take him to Pilate. John 18, verse 28. And they led Jesus, Yeshua, from Caiaphas, that's the high priest, unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. And so they didn't want to be involved. Remember, it was one of their rules, you can't be having court and that kind of thing on the high feast day. And Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? And they answered and they said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, if he were not an evildoer, talking about Yeshua, we would not have delivered him up to thee. So he's saying, hey, what is he charged with? Hey, look, we're bringing him to you. If he wasn't an evil guy, we wouldn't have brought him here, so the case should be case closed. It's kind of what they're implying here. They answered and they said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up to thee. And then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him, according to your law. Hey, if he's an evildoer, according to your law, then go ahead, you take him, you judge him. It's early. I haven't had my coffee yet. And the Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. We're going to go there in a second. But the bottom line was, it was not legal. The Jews were under Roman occupation, right? The Romans were over them in their land, and they weren't allowed to put anybody to death. But the Rome pulled that right from them and said, we're going to do this. So the Sanhedrin, they couldn't stone people to death or anything. It was against the law for them to have capital punishment. So they bring him to Pilate to be put to death. And then it says there, saying of Yeshua might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. That saying is in John 12:30 through 33. So you can just back up to John 12:30. John 12:30. Yeshua answered and said, This voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world, that's Sar Ha'alam, Satan, the prince of this world shall be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. When he says, I will be lifted up from the earth, every time that comes up in John, it's talking about his crucifixion. It's not talking about his resurrection to the Father. It's talking about being lifted up on that pole that they crucified him on. And so when we flip back here to John 18, not lawful for us to put anybody to death. Well, that's how they're going to put him to death. They want to crucify him. Verse 33, and then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and he called Yeshua, and he said unto him, art thou the king of the Jews? Now, if you remember, he was beat up at Caiaphas's house, and you know, they adorned him, and they mocked him, and he's blindfolded, and it's been a long night, and so he looks a mess, right? And here he's going, are you the king of the Jews? Really? You know, that's kind of how he asked him that. And Yeshua answered him, sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Are you coming up with this king of the Jews thing all on your own, or did other people tell you this? You know, where are you getting this from? It's kind of how he answered Pilate. And Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Hey, you know, what do I know? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? This strikes me, and this is where I said we're going to get a little political this time. You know, this is what happened to Yeshua, but this is what's kind of happening to the church and what is going to happen to the church in the end days. And we'll kind of make that point later as we go along. But the bottom line is they were betrayed from within. Just like Yeshua was betrayed from within his little circle by Judas, now if you take the circle bigger, you know, Jewry, right? I mean, you know, whatever. The believers at that time, if you will, of you know, the Israelites, the remaining Israelites, they turn in their own God to outsiders, to Romans. The Romans certainly aren't Israelites, right? And yet he gets turned over to them. And he goes, hey, your own people have delivered you unto me. What have you done? Verse 36, and Yeshua answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from hence. And Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? So are you a king? I mean, you know, where are you going with this? And Yeshua answered, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, for this reason was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Every one that is of the truth hears my voice. And then Pilate said unto him, what's truth? And that's how he says it. What's truth? You know, Pilate is a Roman, right? So he has these Roman gods and beliefs. He's got Greek stuff coming into his psyche. He's in the land of the Jews, right, of the Israelites in Judah. So he's getting their beliefs. He's a governor, so he understands that. Everybody has different views on what truth is, and he's like, what's truth? And it got me thinking today about politicians and how they play with the truth, right? Well, what's the truth? The truth is what I say it is. The truth is what the people believe. Truth is in perception. Truth is what we make happen. You know, there's all kinds of answers that people use to get out of it. But the word of the Lord tells us what truth is. And just two that came to mind was Psalms 119, 2 verses. 151 says, thou art near, O Yahweh, and all thy commandments are truth. So what's truth? All Yah's commandments are truth. And Psalm 119, verse 142, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law, thy Torah, is the truth. There's truth. What's truth? Torah is truth. Who's the living Torah? Yeshua, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no man comes unto the Father but by me. That's truth. But Pilate doesn't know that. He's like, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews, and he said unto him, I find in him no fault at all. So Pilate didn't find anything wrong with Yeshua. Back to Luke 23. They took him to Pilate so that he would be killed, because they couldn't kill him. Look at verse 2. It would help if I could get there. And they began, so they bring him to Pilate, and then they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation. That means agitating the people, the nation. And forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. So there's three things there that they tell Pilate they've caught Yeshua doing. And that's why they're bringing him to Pilate, is what they say, even though the real reason they're bringing him to Pilate so Pilate kills him. But here's the reality. Pilate is not going to put this Jew to death who's only broken Jewish law. He doesn't care about Jewish law. He doesn't care if he blasphemes the Most High Yah, which we know he didn't, but Pilate certainly doesn't care about that. I mean, Pilate's not an Israelite, right? And so they have to come up with something else to accuse him of to make Pilate put him to death. And what they say is he's perverting the nation. He's agitating the people. He's stirring them up. He's creating an insurrection. This is very fearful to the Roman authorities. The Romans are in the minority. They're occupying Judah, right? They've come in as an occupying power, and there's all these people there. They've got control of it for now, and what they fear is an insurrection. And I'll tell you that right now, our country, the leaders, the powers that be, fear an insurrection. There is no insurrection right now. The people in this country are not upset about anything enough to take up arms and go against the government. And yet and still the government is preparing for a counterinsurgency to be fought in this land. Now, I've been saying this forever, and Drudge has just started picking up articles on it in the last 2 days. The CIA was working with New York City on a terrorist thing domestically, right? Everybody thinks CIA only works overseas, but they were working domestically, and they were sensitizing them to things. And then New York started their terrorist database, and they started tracking people, and the New York City Police Department was actually taping and recording suspected Muslim terrorists in New Jersey without telling New Jersey, right? I mean, this is against the law. It's against all kinds of laws. So they're preparing, they're tracking people, and they always do this. They say, well, that's those evil, dirty, stinky Muslims, terrorists, so it's okay to do it to them. They'll do the same thing in a crime-ridden area. Right now, they're trying to float another trial balloon, 2 of them actually. One is that in government housing, government-supplied housing, which is typically where people with no money live, and typically those places are full of, all kinds of vice, right? Drugs, crime, murder, sex, all that stuff goes on in those projects, the housing projects. And so people don't like that. American people have a very negative view of the projects, and so they're floating 2 trial balloons. One, you're not allowed to have a gun in the projects. Oh, wow. If you live here, you can't have a gun. Right? And so far that's passing because nobody's going to stand up for those hoodlums that live in the projects. They don't do anything with guns except hurt people anyway. So that's one. The second thing that they're floating right now is that everybody that lives in that housing gets fingerprinted. See, they start it with them. It's just like the insurrection. There's no insurrection now, then why are our police carrying, M4s around in their vehicles? I'm not going to say the name because you guys are recording it, but this little town that we live outside of, how many terrorists are running around this little town? Zero. Why are the cops carrying M4s? Why do they have body armor and helmets? Why do they have APCs, tanks, armored vehicles, not tanks, but armored personnel carriers in all these SWAT teams? It's because they're getting ready to fight an insurrection. It's why they're tracking people. It's why they're starting to control food, and they're setting in place the implements. That's why these censuses occur. Where does everybody live? Who's in the household? And so they're setting the stage. And people who are in power really do fear insurrection if it's a possibility. And when you're a colonizing power, like the Romans were in Israel, they were afraid of insurrection. And the leaders, the church leaders, knew that. And they said, he's an agitator. He's stirring the people up to overthrow you. And so hoping that would get his attention. The other thing they say is he's forbidding tribute to Caesar. He's telling people not to pay their taxes. Now, what did Yeshua say? They tried to trick him. Remember, should we give this money to Caesar or not? And Yeshua's not going to be trapped by that. Should we give it to the church? Should we give it to Caesar? What should we do with this money? And Yeshua said, look at that coin. Whose picture's on it? There's a picture of Caesar on the coin. And he says, render unto Caesar, therefore, the things that are Caesar's. Render unto the Most High Yah, the things that are Most High Yah's. It's like, you're not tracking me in that. I don't care about money. Give your money to Caesar. You know a sure way to get a SWAT team to come visit you in this country is become a vocal tax protester. I'm not paying my taxes and you can't make me, and let me tell you how to not pay your taxes. Man, you're going to get a SWAT team down here. Government doesn't like it when people say they're not going to pay taxes. Now, I pay my taxes. I don't care because I don't care about money. But there are people out there, they're up in Montana and Idaho and stuff, and they start these things where they say don't pay your taxes, and the government comes down on them hard because governments fear that. The church leaders knew that. So number 2 accusation, first one is he's an agitator. He's stirring up insurrection. The second one is he's telling people not to pay their taxes. All right, so he's going to try and rob you. And then the third one, he is a king. He's setting himself up as a king, not Caesar. I'll tell you another way to get in trouble in this country and probably any other country is say, I don't recognize the powers that be in this country. I'm in charge. This is a sovereign land right here. No one has the power here but me. And then they're going to show you who has the power. Right? You know, if it takes bringing the 82nd Airborne in to quash that little rebellion, they're going to do it. Right? And so, you know, why people do that is beyond me. But they're saying, these are the 3 things they're saying about Yeshua. They're all lies. Every one of those things is a lie. None of those things is true that they say about Yeshua. And this is the church elders. This is the high priest, you know, and the people who are somebody in the church. And they're lying because they want to get the death penalty for Yeshua. They want him put away. He is cramping their style. The reality is these people don't give a darn, really, about those crimes. They don't care if somebody doesn't pay taxes to Caesar. They don't care if somebody doesn't recognize Caesar. They don't care if people stir up people against Caesar. As a matter of fact, they're in the process of doing that. And in AD 70, Rome's going to say, I had enough of this mess. And they're going to crush them. Right? So they're doing the very same things they're accusing Yeshua of. And you know, a lot of times when you accuse somebody of something, you point your finger at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. Right? And so that's what's going on by them. So, verse 3. And Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou king of the Jews? And he answered and said, You got it. That's what thou sayest it means. You know, it's basically an affirmation. It's an ironic question. Are you king of the Jews? I said that already. You know, Yeshua's sitting there looking a mess. He's bound. He's tied up. And here's Pilate, you know, in his regalness. He's like, Are you the king of the Jews? You know, really? You, little guy? You know, and that's another thing. People say they know what Yeshua looked like. They don't know what Yeshua looked like. People draw these pictures of him, you know, the Mormon Jesus, right, with the blonde hair and the blue eyes and the really strong jaw and that nice, you know, nose, and he just looks like the perfect Aryan male, right? I mean, that's what he looks like when they draw him with long hair. And it's like, no, it says, we can read in the Word that he wasn't even a good-looking guy, you know, compared to what people think. So he's saying, hey, are you the king of the Jews? And he's ironic. Now, then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. Pilate knows what's going on. Despite what they just accused him of, you know, he didn't get made the governor of this far-flung region of Rome for nothing. He's not stupid. He's a smart guy. He's used to dealing with all kinds of people. He knows all about infighting. Matter of fact, we're going to see an example of that with him and Herod. He knows all about politics, and he's not going to play the fool. And he's like, guys, look, you have problems with him. You know, that's your problems. I have no fault with this guy. He's not doing any of these things. You can't prove that he said or doing any of these things you accuse him of. And when he says that, verse 5, and they were the more fierce. They kept insisting, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. And when he hears the word Galilee, Pilate's ears go, bink, because he sees a way out of this. Because he's feeling, here's the deal, he's feeling the pressure of the local leaders. And when you are controlling, you know, when you're doing counterinsurgency or when you're doing your little colonial administration, you're in charge, you're the power, you have the army, but you're outsiders. And so you have to work with the local insiders, you know, the natural leaders that are there to make things work. And the natural leaders that are here are the church leaders. All right, so he doesn't believe them, but man, they're being pretty insistent that he kills this guy. But he doesn't want to kill him because it's just, one, he doesn't believe that he's worthy of death, and two, it's like, I just don't want to get involved in this stuff. And yet still these guys are going, you got to do something, you got to do something. He's like, man, these guys are the powers to be of the people we're ruling. And then he hears Galilee, and he's like, oh, Galilee? And so look, verse 6, when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. Oh, Galilee. Is Yeshua from Galilee? And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was at Jerusalem at that time. So Herod had made an appearance, he'd made a journey. Of course, Pilate knew. It's like that guy over there, that other leader. And he's like, okay, he's the tetrarch. So he says, I'm going to send him to him. It reminded me of politicians again today. I hate the way a politician will not answer a question. If I'm a politician, first of all, I don't think politicians in America really have views. I think they've sold their soul to Satan so bad that they don't really have a view. And it's like, Brother Justin is asking me a question. Where do you stand on farmer subsidies? And I'm looking at Brother Justin, and I'm like, well, he's got a Progenics hat on, and he's got a T-shirt, and he's got tennis shoes on. He doesn't look like a farmer. Well, I think that, and they'll give you some question that kind of makes you think he's not for farmer subsidies, because you don't look like a farmer. But he's not going to go all the way to say, I'm against farmer subsidies.
Right.
He's also not going to say, I'm for farmer subsidies. Where are you on gun control? I'm for gun control, I'm against gun control. It's a pretty simple question. Where are you on abortion? Well, abortion is a very complicated issue, and there's one answer, right? But politicians don't want to do that. And so Pilate is like that. Pilate doesn't want to make a decision, but he wants to rid himself of this distasteful little affair that's coming up. So he's like, I'll send him to Herod. I'll let Herod deal with it. And he passes the buck. And that's what politicians do today. They pass the buck. He's a wishy-washy politician. So, verse 8. Now, when Herod saw Yeshua, he was exceedingly glad. That's Herod was glad. For he was desirous to see him for a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by Yeshua. This is the Herod that killed John the Baptist, right, that had him beheaded. He knows about Yeshua. He's heard, he is from Galilee, and Herod's over Galilee. He's heard of the miracles that he's doing, and so Herod is interested, but he's not interested for the right reason. What Herod wants is amusement. Herod's a sick little puppy. He really is. Come on. John the Baptist accuses him of sleeping with his, help me out here.
Wife, I think.
Yeah, he told him you can't kill your brother off and marry his wife, who's also
right.
like your cousin.
And then he
like
kills
that.
John the Baptist because his wife says, I don't like that guy bringing his head on a platter, right? So he doesn't.
Who was his brother's wife.
Right, and he's a sick little puppy. And so all he wants is to be amused by Yeshua. He just wants to see some magic tricks. Oh! And it reminds me today of the weirdness that we hear of our politicians. I remember when I thought Bohemian Grove was one of those conspiracy theories, which Brother Joe just explained to me is actually a term made up by the government. Conspiracy theory. Another story for another time. Talk about it afterwards. But I thought that Bohemian Grove was a conspiracy theory. And it's like no truth in it. No, it's absolutely true. All these world leaders go to this little campsite once a year and do this thing to care, this big owl, and they have this burning effigy and stuff. And it's weird. It's sick when you read what's going on. And the people that go are world leaders. They really are. They've all gone. And it's like, what? The cremation of care. What is going on here? So those people at the top, they're weird puppies, man. They're not like us. They put on a suit, or they'll roll up their sleeves when they're talking to the farmers. But man, they are not like us, and they don't think like us. And Herod was one of those people. And so he just wants to be amused and see what's going on. All right. So then he questions him with many words, but he answered him nothing. I was thinking about this, and you already have the answer because I went there. But, at first we think that as believers, when somebody asks us about Yeshua, we should automatically be anxious to share Yeshua with anyone. Well, tell me about this Yeshua. So he's your Messiah, huh? Well, yes, he is. Even if they're sarcastic, they're an atheist or something like that, and they're baiting you, a lot of people feel like we have to go ahead and talk to those people because we may help save one soul. And the reality is we're not supposed to cast our pearls before swine. And Yeshua recognizes that Herod is a swine. And he's not even going to waste his breath talking to this guy. I am not here for your amusement. I'm not going to give you any satisfaction. And that's something for us to think about too. Just because somebody asks a question, we have to exercise discernment. Where are they going with this question? If they're just setting me up to be mocked or to be ridiculed, or if they just want to hear a funny little story and then laugh about it and titter about it, you don't deserve, at least from me, the truth. What is truth? Well, you're not getting it. Not for me. The Most High wants you to get it. You might get it from somebody else. Yeshua doesn't even play. He doesn't answer him anything in verse 9. So, verse 10, and the chief priests and the scribes, they stood and they vehemently accused him. So, here's these church leaders. They're supposed to be dignified men of God. And they're rabid. They just want this guy killed. The last guy didn't kill him. They want this guy to kill him. It's like, man, somebody's got to kill this guy. Hey, no, you don't understand. He's doing all these things. They're church leaders. So I got to thinking. Put that in today. Put that into what I think is the near future when the church is being persecuted, just like Christ was being persecuted before. Who are the church leaders? What's this church that is forming up now? This coexist, right? The Rick Warrens of the world. I remember when Rick Warren was picked. He owns a really huge church called Saddleback Church, and he did. I don't know if he still does not, but he was told or asked to give the inaugural prayer at President Obama's inauguration. And somebody came up to me, and he's a famous Christian, and people are really into him, and I was a Christian at the time. And somebody came to me and said, hey, so if you, pastor of Round Prairie Community Church, were asked to give the prayer for President Obama, would you do it? And I thought about that. And I thought, you know what, I would. I would give the prayer because it would give me a chance to share with 1 million people out there the truth of the Most High. But man, if you've watched that guy's career where he's gone, it's like, wow, really? Come on. And so church leaders are very similar, I think, today in a lot of ways. And I think church leaders can turn against the truth. Catholic Church put out, I don't know, a year ago or so, you can't use the name Yahweh. Right? That's like a rule they can't say anymore, because I guess some priests were saying Yahweh. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name. Well, what's the name of the Lord? I mean, Christians all over the country are singing, blessed be the name of the Lord. Well, if it's blessed be, what is his name? It's Yahweh, right? And they should be singing, blessed be the name of Yahweh, right? Or Yahweh, or, whatever. So the church leaders, they vehemently accuse him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught. And he mocked him, and he arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and he returned him to Pilate, sent him back to Pilate. Here's where we see Herod's true feelings, right? He mocked him. He set him at naught. He treats him like he's garbage. And that's all Herod wanted, and that's where he was. So, finishing up in verse 12, and that same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together before they were at enmity between themselves. And so, that day, when Pilate sends Yeshua to Herod, and then Herod deals with him, sort of, and sends him back to Pilate, that's the day that Pilate and Herod became friends. Before that, they didn't get along at all. Two rival leaders of Rome in this land, and now they get along. What unites them? They're different people. Herod's a sick puppy. I don't think Pilate's a sick puppy. We'll probably read next week some more stuff about Pilate. I think he's confused. I think he's weak. I think there's a lot of things about him, but I don't think he's a sick puppy like Herod is. So what unites them? Their opposition to Yeshua. That's what unites them, and that's what's going to unite the world against his people as we come to the end. Is opposition to Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. We read today about Gebel, Ammon, and Amalek, how they united together against Yah's people, right? They didn't get along. They didn't get along in a lot of different levels, and yet they come together to oppose the Israelites, to oppose his people. It's going to happen again. People who don't normally get along are going to find a common theme in opposing the Most High, and I just think we'll leave that there for now. So we saw today 3 types of things. We saw religious leaders of the day who hated Yeshua. And now the reason they hated him is because he was trying to upset their apple cart. He was trying to tell them they were hypocrites, they were vipers, they're trying to steal money from the people, and he was messing up their good deal. All right, so they're united against him. Pilate, he knew a bit about what was going on. He knew a bit about Yeshua, but he was unwilling to make an unpopular decision. He didn't want to crucify him. He didn't want to not crucify him. If I crucify him, then all these people who are following him, because Yeshua was getting a big following, they're going to be mad at me. I could have potential problem with them. But if I don't crucify him, then I got the church leaders, and they're going to be mad at me. And so he's got to come off the fence on one side or another. And he hates that, just like politicians hate to be put in a yes or no, either or, column A or column B. Which one do you want? And they don't want to do that. And so that's Pilate. And then Herod did not take him seriously. Herod just desired amusement, entertainment from Yeshua. Here's the Son of God standing in front of him, and all he wants to do is be entertained. And so I got thinking about that. And can we say that about believers today? I mean, are there believers today? Because at first I said, no way. Can't be a believer and hate Yeshua. You know what? I think there are. Because, Yeshua said, my son and I were just listening to the radio the other day, and a guy was going over, man, he got it almost right. And he said, Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Keep God's commandments. If you love him, you will love your neighbor. And he just kept going. He never came back to the keep God's commandments. Well, if you love him, you will keep his commandments. And if you don't keep his commandments, what are you doing?
Not loving him.
You're not loving him. And the opposite of love is hate. I mean, I don't know, but I'm seeing at least it's weak a little bit, but there's some connection there. Unwilling to make an unpopular decision. That's Pilate. Do we see that today? Do we see people today who go, yeah, I kind of believe it, but man, Christmas is really important to my family. And, I just got to, it's for them really that I got to celebrate this holiday that the Most High Yah hates. They don't put it in those words, but, God's enemy, we're celebrating him and calling it God's birth, Jesus' birth. And I know he hates that, but he'll understand because he knows my heart. Your heart's wicked and black, right? Nothing good comes out of it. And so that's like Pilate, right? They're unwilling to make an unpopular decision. And then Herod, who doesn't take him seriously, and who all he wants is to be entertained. And I know that's true, because I saw that in so many churches when I was a Christian. There are people there who definitely do not take the Most High seriously. They certainly do not take his commandments seriously. And I'm telling you, they're going to church every Sunday because they want to be entertained. I really like that church. They've got a good worship program. That's nice. They've got a good children's church. My little brats don't bother me for an hour a day. I mean, that's what they want. They want to be entertained. And so, in a lot of cases, it's shaping up to look like the world today, when what we're looking at is Pilate and Herod bouncing Yeshua back and forth. Let's pray.